Put the tongs down, fat boy. I said down. The officer's voice sliced through the laughter, hard and sharp, as his hand slapped the barbecue fork from the man's grip, sending it skittering across the grass. Smoke from the grill mixed with the sour stench of authority as another cop snickered, kicking over a tray of ribs. "You people can't even have lunch without breaking a law, huh?" he sneered, brushing imaginary ash off his spotless uniform. The crowd froze, children clutching plates, a woman's scream breaking the silence. The big man stood still, eyes steady, jaw locked. They thought they were humiliating a nobody. They had no idea who they'd just cornered. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Jerome's backyard, turning the air into a thick soup of Georgia heat and barbecue smoke. His large frame moved with practiced ease around the grill, spatula flipping and turning as fat dripped and sizzled on the hot coals below. Despite his size, there was a grace to his movements, muscle memory from a lifetime ago refusing to fade completely. "Now, these right here," Jerome said, pressing the spatula against a rack of ribs. "These are gonna make you forget all about your mama's cooking." He grinned at the small crowd gathered around the picnic tables where Vanessa was laying out paper plates and plastic cups. "Don't let my mother hear you say that," Vanessa called out, arranging bowls of potato salad and coleslaw. "She'll drive down here just to prove you wrong." Her smile lit up her face as she watched their children playing. Tobias, tall for 16, was showing off his basketball moves to some younger kids, while 13-year-old Layla sat cross-legged in the grass, making clover chains with her friends. The scene was picture perfect, exactly what Jerome had dreamed of during those long nights overseas. "Mrs. Johnson from next door waved as she carried over a homemade peach cobbler. "You better save room for dessert," she announced, setting it down beside Vanessa's spread. "Yes, ma'am," Jerome chuckled, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Though these days, saving room ain't exactly my strong suit." He patted his stomach good-naturedly. "Stop that," Vanessa scolded, walking over to kiss his cheek. "You're perfect, just the way you are." "Perfect might be stretching it," Jerome said, but his eyes crinkled with happiness. "Man, sometimes I miss being able to run 5 miles without breaking a sweat. Remember those days, baby?" "I remember you being gone for months at a time," Vanessa replied softly. "I'll take you right here, right now, every single day." A patrol car rolled slowly past their fence, the officer inside clearly studying their gathering. Jerome's hand paused mid-flip, years of training automatically noting details: car number, time of day, direction of travel. But he pushed the thoughts away. This was a day for family, not paranoia. "Daddy, you're gonna burn the meat!" Layla called out, breaking his concentration. "Your daddy doesn't burn meat," Jerome protested, though he quickly adjusted the ribs to a cooler spot on the grill. "That's just extra flavor developing." "Sure it is," Vanessa teased, bumping him with her hip. "That's what you said about the chicken last month, too." Their neighbors laughed, and Jerome joined in, the tension melting away like ice in the summer heat. Mr. Washington from across the street raised his glass. "To the chef! To the chef!" everyone echoed, and Jerome felt warmth that had nothing to do with the grill or the weather. Tobias jogged over, slightly out of breath from his game. "Those almost ready, Dad?" "I'm starving." 10 more minutes, Jerome promised, basting the ribs with his special sauce. "Good things come to those who wait." "That's not what you used to say," Tobias grinned. "Mom told me about the time you couldn't wait for your wedding cake to be cut and stuck your finger in it when no one was looking." "Your mother," Jerome said with mock severity, "needs to stop telling tales about me." But he was smiling as he said it, watching Vanessa laugh and return to organizing the table. The afternoon light turned golden, casting long shadows across the yard. Someone had brought out a portable speaker, and soft soul music drifted through the air. Kids chased each other around the edges of the gathering, their shouts of joy mixing with adult conversation and laughter. Jerome looked around at his slice of paradise, his beautiful wife, his children, his home, his community. It was everything he'd fought for, everything he'd protected. His body might have changed since his Navy SEAL days, but his heart was fuller than ever. A second police cruiser suddenly pulled up beside the yard, its tires crunching on the gravel. The sound of its sirens chirping once cut through the music like a knife, and conversations died mid-sentence. Jerome watched as two white officers stepped out, their hands resting casually but purposefully on their gun belts. He recognized them both, Sergeant Rick Danner and Officer Mason Holt. They were known in the neighborhood, but not for good reasons. The music stopped abruptly, leaving an uncomfortable silence broken only by the sizzle of the grill and the sudden whispers of concerned neighbors. Tobias moved closer to his father, while Layla quickly joined her mother at the picnic table. The carefree atmosphere of moments ago evaporated like morning dew under the hot Georgia sun. Jerome stood perfectly still at his grill, spatula in hand, watching as the officers approached his fence line. The weight of his family's safety pressed down on his shoulders, heavier than any pack he'd carried in training. His mind automatically catalogued possible scenarios, exits, assets, habits that had kept him alive in combat zones now activating in his own backyard. But outwardly, he remained calm, his expression neutral as he watched the officers approach. The officers' boots crunched on the gravel path as they strode through the open gate, their faces set with practiced authority. Sergeant Danner's eyes swept across the gathering like searchlights, while Officer Holt followed 2 steps behind, his younger face trying to mirror his superior's stern expression. Jerome carefully set down his grilling tongs and moved away from the barbecue. He walked with measured steps to meet them halfway, positioning himself between the officers and his family. His movements were deliberate, non-threatening, but his shoulders were squared, old habits dying hard. "Afternoon, officers," Jerome said evenly. "Is there something I can help you with?" Danner's voice carried across the yard like a bullhorn. "We've got noise complaints from the neighbors, multiple calls about loud music and disturbances." Several guests exchanged confused looks. The music had been barely audible beyond the fence line, and most of their actual neighbors were right there at the party. Vanessa stepped forward, a paper plate loaded with fresh grilled ribs in her hands. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were cautious. "Officers, we're just having a family barbecue. Would you like to join us? There's plenty to go around." Danner's lip curled as he looked at the offered plate. With a quick flick of his wrist, he knocked it from Vanessa's hands, sending ribs scattering across the grass. "We're not here for your food, ma'am." Officer Holt reached up and tapped his body cam, the small red light indicating it was recording. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, eyes darting between Danner and the crowd. "Let me get my ID for you," Jerome said calmly, reaching for his back pocket with slow, telegraphed movements. "This is my home, officers. We have all the proper permits for a gathering this size." "Your home?" Danner's voice dripped with skepticism. He looked around at the well-maintained yard, the nice patio furniture, the new grill. "And how exactly did you manage to afford a place like this?" "Boy." The word hung in the air like poison. Someone in the crowd gasped. Mrs. Johnson covered her mouth with her hand, while Mr. Washington's face darkened with anger. "I own an auto repair shop on Madison Street," Jerome replied, his voice level despite the insult. "Been there 15 years now. Here's my ID." He held out his driver's license. Danner snatched it, making a show of examining it closely. "Jerome Hightower," he read aloud, stretching out each syllable mockingly. "Well, well. And all these people are your Friends, family, and neighbors, Jerome confirmed. We do this every summer. Holt's body cam continued recording as he started making notes in a small pad, though his hand trembled slightly. The younger officer seemed less comfortable with the situation, but he made no move to intervene. Whispers rippled through the gathering. Phones appeared in hands, their cameras pointed discreetly toward the confrontation. The children had all gravitated toward the back of the yard, where other adults stood protectively near them. Officers, Jerome said, keeping his voice steady and professional, I understand you're doing your job, but there's been no violation here. I'd appreciate it if you'd please leave my property so we can continue our celebration. Danner took a step closer, invading Jerome's personal space. Despite Jerome's height and bulk, the sergeant seemed to be trying to loom over him. Are you telling me how to do my job? No, sir, Jerome replied. I'm simply requesting. The push came without warning, Danner's hands shooting out to strike Jerome hard in the chest. The force was enough to make Jerome stumble back a step, his shoes scuffing in the dirt. Dad! Tobias's voice rang out as he lurched forward, his teenage face contorted with rage. Jerome's arm shot out to the side, a clear signal for his son to stay back, even as he regained his balance. His jaw clenched tight enough to crack walnuts, but his voice remained controlled. Son, stay where you are. The afternoon sun seemed to grow hotter as Jerome straightened to his full height, his shadow stretching across the ground between him and the officers. The crowd had gone completely silent now, the only sounds the distant chirp of birds and the forgotten sizzle of the grill. Danner's hand rested openly on his holster, his smile more of a sneer as he watched Jerome's reaction. Behind him, Officer Holt's face had gone pale, but his body cam continued to record steadily. Jerome stood perfectly still, his Navy SEAL training screaming through his muscles to react, to move, to neutralize the threat. But he kept his hands visible and his breathing steady, even as his pulse thundered in his ears. This was his home. His family was watching, and he knew one wrong move could turn this already dangerous situation deadly. The tension crackled in the humid air like electricity before a storm. Vanessa had moved closer to Tobias, her hand on their son's shoulder, both restraining and supporting him. Layla pressed against Mrs. Johnson's side, her young face a mask of worry as she watched her father face down the hostile officers. Around the yard, phones continued recording silently, capturing every moment of the confrontation. The afternoon light caught the silver of Danner's badge as he shifted his stance, seeming to wait, almost hope, for Jerome to give him an excuse to escalate further. Jerome remained rooted in place, his expression set like stone, as he met Danner's challenging stare. The years of military discipline warred with the instinct to protect his family, leaving him balanced on a knife's edge of control. Jerome brushed the dirt from his shirt with deliberate calm, though his heart hammered against his ribs. The push had been meant to provoke him, to make him react. He'd seen these tactics before. Danner's smirk widened as he watched, while Holt let out a nervous chuckle that echoed across the suddenly silent yard. Something funny, Officer Holt? Jerome asked quietly, his eyes never leaving Danner's face. Shut your mouth, Danner snapped. Nobody gave you permission to speak. Vanessa stepped forward, her hands trembling but her voice steady. This is completely out of line, Sergeant. We know our rights. You can't just— Can't what? Danner's head snapped toward her, his face reddening. Can't do my job? Maybe you should teach your fat husband some manners instead of running that mouth of yours. The backhand came fast, a brutal crack that sent Vanessa stumbling sideways. The sound seemed to freeze time itself. Children screamed. Phones clattered to the ground. Someone shouted for help, but Jerome didn't hear any of it. The world narrowed to crystal clarity, time slowing to a crawl as training took over. His body moved with fluid precision, muscle memory from countless drills surging to the surface. He stepped forward, not charging, but gliding, while Holt was still reaching for his weapon. Jerome's hands found the pressure points on Holt's wrist with surgical accuracy. One twist, and the young officer's grip went slack. The gun clattered to the grass as Holt dropped to his knees, face contorted in shock and pain. "What the f—" Danner's curse cut off as he lunged forward, baton already swinging. But Jerome had anticipated the move. He shifted his weight, redirecting Danner's momentum. In one smooth motion, he trapped the sergeant's arm in a joint lock that brought the larger man to his toes. "That's enough," Jerome said, his voice eerily calm. "Don't make me break it." The crowd erupted. Some people screamed, others shouted encouragement. Phones recorded everything from multiple angles as the two officers, who had arrived so full of authority, found themselves completely neutralized by the man they'd dismissed as just another target. "Dad!" Tobias called out, his voice cracking with a mix of fear and awe. "Stay back," Jerome ordered, never taking his eyes off Danner. The sergeant's face had gone from red to purple, veins standing out on his neck as he tried to struggle against the hold. But Jerome's grip was precision itself, the product of years of training in the art of control rather than destruction. Holt remained on his knees, cradling his wrist and staring up with wide eyes at the scene unfolding before him. His earlier bravado had evaporated, replaced by naked fear, as he realized just how badly they'd miscalculated. "You're under arrest," Danner gasped out between clenched teeth. "No," Jerome replied softly. "I'm defending my family from assault. Every bit of this is on camera. Every word. Every action." He increased the pressure ever so slightly, causing Danner to rise higher on his toes. "How's that backup footage going to look, Sergeant? You assaulting a woman at a family barbecue?" Mrs. Johnson had helped Vanessa to her feet. A bright red mark bloomed across her cheek where Danner had struck her, but her eyes blazed with fury rather than fear now. "I want your badge numbers," she demanded. "Both of you. This ends today." The children had clustered together near the back fence, their young faces a mixture of terror and confusion as they watched the adults in their lives locked in this sudden violence. Layla buried her face in her older brother's shirt, while Tobias held her protectively, his jaw set in a mirror of his father's determination. The first distant wail of sirens cut through the chaos. Jerome's ears picked up at least 3 distinct patterns, multiple units, incoming fast. He knew what came next. They all did. "Last chance," he said to Danner, whose face had started to take on a worrying shade of blue. "Are we done here?" The sergeant could only manage a choked grunt in response. Jerome released the hold with the same controlled precision he'd applied it, stepping back with his hands raised as Danner collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. The sirens grew louder, accompanied now by the screech of tires on pavement. Jerome stood perfectly still, hands clearly visible above his head, as 3 police cruisers screeched to a halt outside his fence. The backup officers poured out with weapons drawn, shouting orders that overlapped into unintelligible noise. "On the ground!" one finally bellowed clearly. "Face down now!" Jerome complied, lowering himself to the earth with deliberate slowness. The grass was cool against his cheek, the smell of soil filling his nostrils as heavy boots thundered toward him. "Don't hurt him!" Vanessa's voice cut through the chaos. "He was defending me." "They attacked us first." The impact came anyway, a knee driving into Jerome's back as rough hands seized his wrists. The cuffs bit deep as they were ratcheted tight enough to bruise. Jerome didn't resist, didn't speak, just kept his face pressed to the ground as they hauled him upright. The sun beat down mercilessly as they dragged him toward the waiting cruiser. Through the commotion, he could hear Vanessa calling his name, her voice breaking with emotion. The peaceful afternoon had shattered into nightmare. leaving broken plates, scattered food, and shocked faces in its wake. Blue and red lights strobed across the manicured lawn, casting eerie shadows that danced across the faces of shocked onlookers. Jerome sat rigid in the back of the police cruiser, blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow where they'd pressed him into the ground. Through the window he could see Vanessa clutching their children, her arms wrapped protectively around Tobias and Layla as they watched with tear-streaked faces. "This isn't right!" Mrs. Johnson shouted, her voice carrying above the growing crowd. "They attacked him!" We all saw it. The gathering of neighbors pressed closer to the police line, phones held high to capture every moment. Mrs. Lorna Briggs, who lived 3 houses down, stood at the front, her hands steady as she narrated into her phone's camera. "I'm live right now from Cedar Grove." Her voice trembled with anger. "What you're seeing is the aftermath of police brutality against one of our most respected neighbors. They came to a family barbecue and assaulted a woman in front of her children. Let him go! Let him go!" The chant started softly, then grew in volume as more voices joined in. Even some of the white neighbors who'd been hesitant to get involved found their voices, the injustice of what they'd witnessed overwhelming their usual caution. Officer Holt climbed into the driver's seat, still nursing his wrist. His face was flushed with embarrassment and barely contained rage. Sergeant Danner barked orders at the backup officers, pointing at the crowd while rubbing his throat where Jerome's hold had nearly choked him out. Jerome caught Vanessa's gaze through the window. Despite the cuffs cutting into his wrists, despite the blood and humiliation, his eyes held steady. In that look passed years of understanding, of trust built through hardship. She nodded almost imperceptibly, knowing what he was trying to tell her. "Stay strong. Protect the kids. I'll handle this." The engine roared to life. As the cruiser pulled away from the curb, phones followed its path, recording until it disappeared around the corner. The crowd's angry shouts faded into the distance, leaving behind a scene of devastation. Overturned chairs, scattered food, a family's peaceful Sunday destroyed in minutes. Hours crawled by like years. Night fell, and Vanessa sat alone at the kitchen table, the house too quiet without Jerome's presence. Her cheek still stung where Danner had struck her. She scrolled through her phone, watching the incident spread across social media like wildfire. Mrs. Briggs's live stream had already hit 2 million views. Justice for Jerome trended nationally. The raw footage showed everything. Danner's aggression, the unprovoked assault on Vanessa, Jerome's controlled response. Comments poured in by the thousands. This is what police brutality looks like. He was protecting his wife. They attacked a family BBQ? This has to stop. But then came the shift. Local news channels picked up the story, but their headlines told a different tale. Ex-military man assaults officers during routine call. The police department's official statement scrolled across the screen. During a response to multiple noise complaints, officers were violently attacked by Jerome Hightower, a former military serviceman. Officer Mason Holt sustained injuries requiring medical attention. The suspect's military training makes him extremely dangerous. Vanessa's hands shook as she watched the narrative twist. They were painting Jerome as unstable, dangerous, erasing the truth that hundreds had witnessed. The department's social media accounts flooded timelines with carefully selected screenshots, showing only the moment Jerome had subdued the officers, cutting out everything that led to it. "No, no, no," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. More headlines appeared. Dangerous ex-SEAL attacks, local police, military training turned against law enforcement, violent veteran, a community at risk. Her phone buzzed with messages from family, friends, church members, all asking if they were okay, all sharing the spreading news stories. Even some who'd been there seemed unsure now, their memories competing with the official narrative being pushed by authorities. "Mom?" Layla's voice came soft from the doorway. She stood in her pajamas, looking smaller than her 13 years. "Why are they lying about Dad?" Vanessa quickly wiped her eyes. "Because sometimes people in power would rather tell lies than admit they did something wrong, baby." "But we have videos. Everyone saw what really happened." "I know, sweetheart. I know." Vanessa pulled her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "But they're trying to make your father look like a monster," Tobias finished from behind them. He'd been quiet since they'd taken Jerome away, anger simmering beneath his surface. "They're turning him into the monster." Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but a sharp knock at the front door cut her off. Through the window, she could see camera lights and microphones, reporters already gathering on her lawn like vultures. Another knock, more insistent this time. "Mrs. Hightower, Channel 5 News. We'd like to get your statement about your husband's violent outburst today." Tobias started toward the door, fists clenched, but Vanessa caught his arm. "No," she said firmly. "We do this smart, not angry. That's what your father would want." The knocking continued, accompanied by more voices calling out questions. Vanessa held her children close in the darkened kitchen, her phone still buzzing with notifications as the false narrative spread. Outside, camera flashes lit up the night like lightning, demanding answers she wasn't ready to give. Dawn crept through the drawn curtains of the Hightower home, casting weak shadows across the living room floor, where Vanessa had spent a restless night on the couch. The constant flash of cameras and murmur of voices outside had made sleep impossible. Tobias and Layla had finally dozed off around 3 in the morning, exhausted from crying and worry. A sharp knock startled Vanessa from her daze. She approached the front door cautiously, peeking through the peephole. The front lawn had transformed into a media circus overnight. At least 20 reporters crowded the porch, microphones and cameras at the ready. Taking a deep breath, Vanessa opened the door a crack. The response was immediate and overwhelming. "Mrs. Hightower, is your husband mentally stable? Did his military service make him violent? How long has he shown aggressive tendencies? What about the officers he injured?" Camera flashes exploded in her face. Microphones thrust forward like weapons. Vanessa slammed the door shut, her heart pounding. The knocking resumed immediately, more insistent than before. With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. She stopped at David Reese's number. The civil rights attorney had helped their church with legal matters before, and Jerome always spoke highly of his integrity. More importantly, he understood what it meant to fight against a system designed to crush you. "David, it's Vanessa Hightower. We need your help." Reese's voice came back steady and professional. "I saw the news, Vanessa. I'll be there in 2 hours." True to his word, Attorney Reese arrived that afternoon, navigating through the media crowd with practiced ease. His tall frame filled the doorway as Vanessa ushered him inside. He carried a weathered leather briefcase and wore an expression of contained fury. "Show me everything," he said, settling at the kitchen table. Vanessa pulled up video after video on her laptop. Mrs. Briggs's live stream, neighbor footage, social media clips. With each viewing, Reese's face grew darker. He took detailed notes, occasionally muttering under his breath. "The department's covering their tracks," he said finally, closing his notebook. "They're trying to control the narrative before the truth can spread further." Classic playbook. Paint the victim as the aggressor, especially when the victim is a black man who can defend himself. "But we have all this footage," Layla protested from where she sat listening. "Everyone saw what really happened." Reese smiled sadly. "Sometimes the truth isn't enough, sweetheart. We need to prove they're lying, not just show what happened." Meanwhile, across town, Jerome sat alone in a holding cell. The concrete bench offered no comfort, but his military training had taught him how to endure discomfort. He'd been here nearly 24 hours, given only water and a stale sandwich. His requests to call his family had been denied. The cell door clanged open. Captain Brenda Ames walked in, her uniform pressed perfect, her face a mask of professional concern. Another officer followed with a chair for her. "Mr. Hightower," she said, sitting down, "I hope you've had time to reflect on your actions." Jerome met her gaze steadily. "I've reflected on a lot of things, Captain, like why your officers assaulted my wife at a family barbecue." Ames sighed, as if disappointed. "We've reviewed Officer Holt's body cam footage. Unfortunately, it's rather inconclusive. Technical issues, you understand. These things happen." Jerome's jaw tightened. They'd deleted it. Of course they had. "But I'm here to help you," Ames continued, leaning forward. "You have an impressive military record. It would be a shame to see that tarnished. If you plead guilty to assaulting an officer, we can make this go away. Probation, maybe some anger management classes. No prison time. You want me to confess to a crime I didn't commit? I want to help you avoid making this situation worse." Ames's tone turned icy. "Think about your family, Mr. Hightower. Your children. Your wife's career as a teacher. This could follow all of you for years." Jerome sat perfectly still, his voice quiet but firm. "No deal." Ames stood, brushing invisible dust from her uniform. "Then we'll bury you. By the time we're done, no one will believe a word you say. You'll be just another angry black man who couldn't control himself." She paused at the door. "Last chance. Get out of my cell." That night, Jerome's mugshot appeared on national television. The photo had been carefully chosen, an angle that made him look menacing, his expression stern. The headline beneath read, "Aggressive ex-soldier attacks officers." The news anchor's voice droned on. Sources within the department described Jerome Hightower as unstable and dangerous. His military training as a Navy SEAL makes him a significant threat to public safety. The officers involved are recovering from their injuries. In his cell, Jerome sat motionless, staring at the bare concrete wall. His body ached from the hard bench, but he barely noticed. His mind was clear, focused. They thought they could break him with lies and threats. They thought his size, his color, his past made him an easy target. They had no idea who they were dealing with. This wasn't the first time he'd faced impossible odds. It wouldn't be the first time he'd overcome them. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows. Jerome remained still, his breathing steady. Not broken, not even close. Just awakening to the real fight ahead. 2 days crawled by like an eternity. Vanessa stood in the kitchen, watching Tobias and Layla pick at their breakfast. Dark circles marked their eyes. None of them had slept well since Jerome's arrest. Outside, news vans lined the street. Their satellite dishes pointed skyward like vultures circling prey. "Time for school," Vanessa announced, trying to sound normal. Her voice cracked slightly. Tobias looked up from his untouched cereal. "Mom, maybe we should stay home again." "No, baby. We can't hide forever." Vanessa grabbed her purse and car keys. "Education matters. Your father would want you in school." They walked to the car through a gauntlet of reporters. Camera flashes burst like lightning. Microphones thrust toward them. Vanessa kept her children close, heads down, moving quickly. "Mrs. Hightower, how do you respond to allegations that your husband— is it true that he threatened— has he shown violent tendencies at home?" Vanessa slammed the car door, shutting out their voices. Her hands trembled as she started the engine. In the rearview mirror, she saw Layla wiping tears. "It's okay, sweetie," she said softly. "They can't hurt us." The drive started normally enough. Vanessa took their usual route, passing familiar landmarks, the corner store, the Baptist church, Mrs. Wilson watering her roses. But 3 blocks in, she noticed a dark sedan behind them. No markings, tinted windows. When she turned left, it followed. Right turn, still there. Her heart rate quickened. She made an unnecessary loop around the block. The sedan stayed with them, maintaining a steady distance, not even trying to be subtle. "Mom!" Tobias had noticed too. "That car—" "I see it, baby. Just stay calm." She dropped Layla off first at the elementary school, then Tobias at the high school. The sedan remained, watching. Only after she confirmed both children were safely inside did she head home, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. The unmarked car finally peeled away near their neighborhood. Vanessa released a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The day dragged on endlessly. She called the school twice to check on the kids. She paced. She cleaned obsessively. She ignored the constant doorbell and phone calls from reporters. As darkness fell, she prepared dinner, though none of them had much appetite lately. The brick came crashing through the front window at 9:47 p.m. The sound of shattering glass filled the house. Layla screamed. Tobias jumped up from the couch. Vanessa rushed to the window, heart pounding. Glass crunched under her feet as she found the brick wrapped in paper, secured with a rubber band. Her hands shook as she unfolded the note. The message was typed, anonymous. "Drop the case or lose everything." Tobias read it over her shoulder. "Mom, go upstairs with your sister," Vanessa ordered, already dialing Attorney Reese's number. "Lock the bedroom door." "Now." Reese answered on the first ring. "Vanessa? What's wrong?" She told him everything. The following car, the brick, the threat. Her voice remained steady, but tears streamed down her face. "I'm filing for an emergency restraining order first thing tomorrow," Reese said firmly. "We'll also document this harassment. They're getting desperate. That's good for us, bad for them. Are you safe right now?" "Yes, but I'm sending a private security team. They'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't call the police." While waiting for security, Vanessa watched coverage of Jerome's bail hearing. The courthouse steps were packed with protesters holding signs, "Justice for Hightower" and "Stop Police Violence." But inside, the system ground on mechanically. Sergeant Danner took the stand, his uniform crisp, his expression earnest. He wove his lies skillfully, describing Jerome as the aggressor who ambushed them without provocation. "We responded to multiple noise complaints," Danner testified smoothly. "Mr. Hightower became combative immediately. Given his military background and physical size, we feared for our safety." The prosecutor nodded sympathetically. "And you say he attacked first?" "Yes, sir, without warning. Officer Holt and I were lucky to escape serious injury." Jerome sat at the defense table watching Danner's performance. His face remained impassive, but his eyes never left the sergeant's smirking face. He recognized that look, the smug satisfaction of power unchecked. He'd seen it before, in other places, on other faces. He would remember this one. Without the body cam footage to contradict Danner's testimony, the outcome was predetermined. The judge denied bail, citing Jerome's military training and demonstrated violent tendencies. Hours later, Vanessa tucked the kids into bed. Private security patrolled outside, but the house felt empty, vulnerable. She gathered blankets and settled on the couch near the broken window, a baseball bat within easy reach. Sirens wailed in the distance, a sound that once meant safety, now a reminder of threat. Cool night air drifted through the shattered glass. Vanessa pulled the blanket tighter, her voice barely a whisper in the darkness. "You picked the wrong family." She sat vigil through the night, watching shadows move across the walls. listening to every sound. The bat stayed close, unused, but ready. Like Jerome had taught her, stay alert, stay strong, never show fear. Morning would come eventually, and with it, another day of fighting back. The fluorescent lights in Attorney Reese's office buzzed quietly as Vanessa sat across from his desk, fidgeting with her wedding ring. 3 days had passed since the brick came through her window. The private security team still patrolled her house, but sleep remained elusive. Reese burst through the door, his tie loose and his eyes bright with excitement. "Sorry I'm late," he said, dropping his briefcase on the desk. "But you need to hear this." "What is it?" Vanessa leaned forward, hope and fear mixing in her chest. "I got a call an hour ago." Reese lowered his voice. "From inside the department. A data technician named Eli Vargas says he has something we need to see." Vanessa's heart skipped. "The body cam footage?" "Better. Dash cam video from both patrol cars. Shows the whole incident from 2 angles." Reese loosened his tie further. "He wants to meet tonight." "Could be a trap," Vanessa said, her voice tight with worry. "I thought of that. But Vargas sounds terrified. Not like someone setting us up. Says he can't live with himself if he stays quiet." Reese checked his watch. "He'll only meet after dark, empty parking lot behind the old Walmart." Vanessa rubbed her temples. "David, I can't lose this case. The kids. Jerome. Trust me," Reese said softly. "This could change everything." Hours later, Vanessa's car crept through the abandoned parking lot. Reese sat beside her, scanning the shadows. A single streetlight cast an orange glow over cracked pavement and scattered trash. The place had been dead since the store closed 2 years ago. "There!" Reese pointed to a beaten-up Honda Civic parked near the building's back wall. A slim figure stood beside it, constantly looking over his shoulder. Vanessa parked several spaces away. "Stay here," Reese told her. "Keep the engine running." She watched him approach the nervous man. Even from this distance, she could see Eli Vargas trembling. He wore khakis and a wrinkled dress shirt, looking nothing like the corrupt cops who'd arrested Jerome. Just a scared young man trying to do the right thing. The meeting lasted less than 2 minutes. A quick exchange of words, a USB drive passing from hand to hand, then Vargas practically ran back to his car. Before leaving, he rolled down his window and called out to Reese. "If they find out I gave you this, I'm done. My career may be worse." Reese hurried back to Vanessa's car as the Honda's taillights disappeared into the night. "Let's go. We need to see what's on this." The drive back to Reese's office felt endless. Vanessa's fingers drummed the steering wheel at every red light. Finally, they rushed inside, locking the door behind them. Reese's hands shook slightly as he plugged the USB drive into his laptop. "Here we go." The video was crystal clear, far better than the shaky cell phone footage that had gone viral. 2 angles showed the entire scene. Danner and Holt arriving, their aggressive approach, the confrontation. The audio picked up every word. "Turn that music down, boy!" Danner's voice crackled through the speakers. "Sir, this is my property." Jerome's calm reply. "We're not breaking any laws." Then came the moment that made Vanessa gasp. The video showed Danner clearly shoving Jerome first, followed by striking Vanessa. The footage captured Jerome's controlled response perfectly. No wild aggression, just precise defensive moves to neutralize the threat. "Oh my God," Vanessa whispered. "It's all there." Reese rewound and watched it again, taking notes. "This destroys their whole narrative. Shows clear police brutality, abuse of power, racist language." His grin grew wider. "We've got them." "What about Vargas?" Vanessa asked. "Will he testify?" "Won't need to. The footage speaks for itself." Reese was already typing an email. "I'm sending copies to trusted colleagues right now. Too many backups for them to bury this one." Vanessa felt tears forming. For the first time since the arrest, Real hope flowed through her. She imagined telling Jerome, seeing him walk free, holding him again. "We need to move fast," Reese said, burning additional copies. "File the motion first thing tomorrow, before they—" A knock at the office door made them both freeze. Reese held up a hand for silence, slowly approaching the door. But it was just the night janitor, apologizing for interrupting. Vanessa released her breath. "You're right. We should go." They gathered their things quickly, Reese tucking copies of the footage into various pockets. "I'll call first thing tomorrow," he promised as they headed to the parking lot. "This changes everything." "Thank you, David." Vanessa hugged him tight. "For everything." They separated to their cars, both too excited to notice the black SUV sitting silently across the street. Inside, Captain Ames lowered her binoculars, watching Reese and Vanessa drive away. Her face remained expressionless as she spoke into her phone. "You shouldn't have crossed me, Reese." Morning light filtered through the high windows of the Jefferson County Courthouse, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The gallery buzzed with tension as neighbors and supporters filled every available seat. Vanessa sat in the front row, gripping her purse so tight her knuckles whitened. Attorney Reese stood at the defense table, his posture confident, despite his wrinkled suit. Jerome entered in his orange jumpsuit, escorted by 2 deputies. Despite a week in custody, he walked with military precision, head high. His eyes found Vanessa's, and a slight nod passed between them. Across the aisle, Sergeant Danner and Officer Holt sat with their department lawyer, both wearing pressed uniforms and practiced neutral expressions. Judge Marion Wallace adjusted her glasses, scanning the crowded courtroom. "I understand the defense has new evidence to present?" "Yes, Your Honor." Reese approached the bench with a USB drive. "We've obtained dash-cam footage from both patrol vehicles present during the incident. This evidence directly contradicts the officer's testimony." The department's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. We weren't notified of any new evidence." "The footage was obtained less than 48 hours ago," Reese countered. "We moved to present it as quickly as possible given its relevance to Mr. Hightower's continued detention." Judge Wallace studied both attorneys. "I'll allow it. Proceed." A court technician connected the drive to the large display screen. The gallery hushed as the first video began playing. The crystal-clear footage showed the officers' arrival, their aggressive approach through the gate. Every word rang through the courtroom speakers. "Turn that music down, boy!" Danner's voice echoed harshly. Murmurs rippled through the gallery as they watched Jerome's calm response, his politeness in the face of escalating hostility. When the footage reached Danner's first shove, gasps filled the room. The camera captured every detail. The unprovoked attack, Danner striking Vanessa, Jerome's controlled defensive moves. Danner's face reddened as his recorded voice spewed racial slurs. Officer Holt stared at his shoes. Their lawyer scribbled furiously on his legal pad. The second angle played, confirming everything. No editing, no ambiguity, just raw truth exposed in high definition. Judge Wallace's expression hardened with each passing moment. When the footage ended, silence gripped the courtroom. Reese stood. "Your Honor, this evidence clearly shows my client acted in justified self-defense after being assaulted by Officer Danner. Furthermore, it proves the officers provided false testimony regarding the initiation of force." The judge removed her glasses, fixing Danner with an icy stare. "I agree. Mr. Hightower, please rise." Jerome stood, straight-backed and dignified despite his prison garb. "In light of this new evidence, I am ordering your immediate release pending further investigation." She turned to the department's lawyer. "And I'm referring this matter to the state police for investigation of perjury charges against Officers Danner and Holt." The gallery erupted in cheers. Deputies moved to uncuff Jerome as reporters rushed forward, cameras flashing. Vanessa vaulted past the barrier, throwing her arms around her husband. Tears streamed down her face as she buried it in his chest. "I knew," she whispered. "I knew the truth would come out." Jerome held her tight, his own eyes glistening. Reese clapped him on the shoulder, grinning broadly. "Let's get you processed out of here." The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork, changing back into civilian clothes and dodging reporters outside the courthouse. Supporters had gathered on the steps, chanting, "Justice for JT." Some held signs reading, "Black Lives Matter," and "End Police Brutality." Jerome addressed them briefly, his voice steady. "Thank you all for standing with my family. The truth is our shield. Justice is our right." More cheers erupted as he made his way to Vanessa's car. Through the crowd he caught a glimpse of Danner and Holt being escorted to their department vehicle, heads down, no longer so proud in their uniforms. That evening, the Hightower home felt alive again. Tobias and Layla wouldn't leave their father's side, peppering him with questions about jail, hanging on his every word. Vanessa ordered pizzas, and they gathered in the living room, the TV muted as news channels played footage of Jerome's release. "Daddy, are the bad police officers going to jail?" Layla asked, curled against his side. Jerome stroked her hair. "I don't know, baby. But they can't hurt us anymore." "We should celebrate properly," Vanessa said, bringing in paper plates. "Have another barbecue this weekend." "Maybe something smaller this time," Jerome chuckled, reaching for a slice of pizza. For the first time in days, real laughter filled the room. They traded stories, made plans, remembered how to be a family again. Later, as the kids cleared plates, Jerome pulled Vanessa close on the couch. "We're almost free," he whispered, kissing her forehead. Outside in the gathering dusk, crickets chirped their evening song. A black SUV sat silently across the street, its tinted windows reflecting the last rays of sunset. Inside the vehicle, orange light flickered briefly, the spark of a lighter igniting in the darkness. A distant car alarm pulled Vanessa from her sleep. Something felt wrong. The air tasted bitter, and her throat burned with each breath. She blinked in the darkness, trying to clear her foggy mind. Then she saw it, wisps of gray smoke seeping under their bedroom door like ghostly fingers reaching for her. The acrid smell hit her full force now. Fire. "Jerome!" She shook her husband awake. "Wake up! Fire!" Jerome snapped to consciousness instantly, military training kicking in. The smoke was thickening rapidly, and an orange glow flickered through the gap beneath the door. Heat radiated through the wood. "Get the kids!" Jerome commanded, already moving. He grabbed a shirt from the floor, pressing it over his face. Vanessa rushed to Layla's room while Jerome headed for Tobias. The smoke was worse in the hallway, making her eyes water. She could hear the hungry crackle of flames downstairs. "Mama?" Layla's frightened voice called out as Vanessa burst in. "Come on, baby. We have to go right now." She scooped up her daughter, wrapping her in a blanket. In the hallway, Jerome emerged with Tobias, who was coughing violently. The stairs were already becoming obscured by thick smoke. Somewhere below, glass shattered from the heat. "Back door through the kitchen!" Jerome shouted over the roar of the flames. He took point, keeping his family behind him as they descended the stairs crouching low. The heat was intense, sweat immediately soaking through their clothes. The living room was an inferno. Fire consumed the curtains, racing up the walls and across the ceiling. Family photos curled and blackened in their frames. The couch where they'd sat, celebrating just hours ago, was now engulfed in flames. They made it to the kitchen, staying low beneath the smoke. Jerome reached for the back door handle, but yanked his hand back. The metal was scorching hot. He grabbed a dish towel to turn it. "Go! Go! Go!" he urged, as Vanessa and the kids stumbled out into the cool night air. That's when he saw it. the propane tank by the grill. The flames were spreading toward it. "Run!" Jerome bellowed, shoving his family forward. They sprinted across the wet grass just as a deafening explosion rocked the neighborhood. The force knocked them off their feet. Heat washed over them in a massive wave as the tank detonated, sending burning debris into the sky. Neighbors poured from their homes, shouting and pointing. Sirens wailed in the distance. The Hightowers huddled together on their lawn, watching helplessly as their home became a raging inferno. Layla sobbed into her mother's chest, while Tobias stood rigid, fists clenched. Mrs. Briggs from next door rushed over with blankets, wrapping them around the family's shoulders. Other neighbors brought water, chairs, offered their homes. The community rallied around them as fire trucks screamed onto their street. David Reese's car screeched to a halt at the curb 30 minutes later. The attorney looked disheveled, clearly having rushed over in his pajamas. His face was a mask of fury as he took in the scene. "This was them," he growled, joining Jerome, who stood apart from the others, watching the firefighters battle the blaze. "This is how they operate: intimidation, destruction, fear." Jerome said nothing, his expression unreadable as he watched his home burn. The flames reflected in his eyes, dancing like vengeful spirits. Hours later, as the fire finally died down, investigators picked through the smoking ruins. The fire chief approached with his preliminary report. "Looks like an accidental gas leak," he said, not quite meeting their eyes. "These old houses. Sometimes the lines just go bad." Jerome waited until the chief walked away, before stepping carefully through the debris of what had been his living room. His trained eye caught what others missed: the remains of a broken bottle, the distinct smell of accelerant beneath the smoke. "Molotov cocktail," he said quietly, as Reese joined him. "They came to silence us, tried to burn us alive in our beds." Vanessa appeared at his side, her face streaked with soot, but her eyes blazing. She squeezed his hand hard. The fear that had gripped her during their escape had transformed into something harder, sharper. "We're not running," she said firmly. "This is our home, our community." Neighbors were already organizing, offering spare rooms, clothes, necessities. Mrs. Briggs announced she'd start a GoFundMe. Others promised to help clean up, to rebuild. The sun began to rise, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of purple and orange. Jerome stood amid the ruins of his home, steam still rising from the charred timbers. Everything they owned was gone: photos, memories, treasured possessions. But his family was alive. And now he had nothing left to lose. "No more running," he said, his voice carrying across the debris-strewn yard. "They wanted a fight. I'll give them one." Reese nodded grimly beside him. Vanessa held Tobias and Layla close, their faces set with the same determination. Around them, neighbors gathered, phones recording, voices raised in anger and support. The smoke rose into the dawn sky like a signal, a declaration of war. The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows of Reese's guest house. Jerome sat on the edge of the bed, watching his family sleep huddled together on the pull-out couch. Their clothes still smelled of smoke. Dark circles marked their eyes, evidence of the nightmare they'd survived. He slipped out quietly, grabbing his car keys. In the driveway, he popped the trunk and moved aside the spare tire, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside sat a heavy metal chest, untouched for years. The lock clicked open under his thumbprint. The lid creaked as he lifted it. Memories flooded back. The weight of responsibility, the brotherhood, the precise violence of his former life. His weathered Navy SEAL insignia lay on top, gold trident still gleaming. Beneath it, wrapped in oiled cloth, his combat knife waited. The encrypted communication gear remained exactly as he'd packed it away, next to a stack of deployment photos. "Dad?" Tobias's voice made him turn. His son stood in the driveway, bare feet on the cold concrete. "Come here, son." Jerome beckoned him over. "There's something you need to understand." Tobias approached cautiously, eyes fixed on the chest's contents. Jerome picked up a photo, showing a younger, leaner version of himself in desert camo, arm around a fellow SEAL named Marcus Boyd. "When I left the teams," Jerome said quietly, "I promised myself I'd never go back to that life. I wanted peace, normalcy, wanted to be the kind of father who grilled burgers and coached Little League." He paused, running his finger along the knife's sheath. "But sometimes the fight comes to you." "Those are from when you were a SEAL?" Tobias asked, picking up the trident insignia carefully. 16 years of service, special operations, things I've never talked about, missions I'll never discuss." Jerome's voice grew firm. "I buried that part of myself because I thought it would give us a better life. But these people, Danner, Ames, all of them, they're not going to stop. They tried to burn us alive, son." Tobias's jaw tightened. "So what are we going to do?" "Not we. Me." Jerome pulled out his phone, showing a contact photo, the same man from the deployment picture. "Marcus Boyd. We served together, saved each other's lives more times than I can count. He's in cybersecurity now. One of the best hackers I know. You're going after them." Tobias's eyes widened. "They deleted evidence, buried complaints, terrorized families. All of it's in their servers somewhere." Jerome began checking the comm gear, muscle memory taking over. "Marcus can find it. Attorney Reese will handle the legal side, make sure everything we uncover is admissible in court." "But that's dangerous, right? Breaking into police computers?" Jerome looked his son in the eyes. "Everything worth fighting for is dangerous. But I trained for years to handle exactly this kind of mission. Gathering intelligence, exposing corruption, protecting the innocent. They thought they were targeting some weak civilian. They didn't know they were waking up a warrior." Inside, Reese was already up, making coffee. He nodded gravely as Jerome laid out the plan. "I'll file the official complaints, handle the press, keep everything appearing legitimate on the surface." Jerome's phone buzzed. Marcus responding to his message. A simple reply. "On my way. Like old times, brother." The morning passed in careful preparation. Jerome cleaned his gear while Reese made calls. Vanessa helped Layla sort through donated clothes, while Tobias watched his father work, asking careful questions about his service years. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" Tobias finally asked. "About what you really did?" Jerome paused in his work. "Because I wanted you to grow up believing in peace, believing that violence wasn't the answer." He sighed heavily. "But sometimes, son, peace isn't an option. Sometimes you have to fight back, not with blind rage, but with precision, with purpose." By afternoon, Marcus arrived, tall, lean, carrying several laptops and monitoring equipment. The two men embraced like brothers. "Heard you needed some technical support," Marcus said, eyes hard. "Nobody burns my brother's house down." They converted Reese's home office into a command center. Marcus began setting up surveillance equipment while explaining the digital aspect of their mission. "Police servers are protected, but they're not NSA level. We find the gaps, extract the evidence, compile it all. Clean," Jerome added. "Everything has to be clean. No traces back to us." "Just like Kandahar," Marcus nodded. "Remember? The intel extraction? Different enemy, same principles." As evening approached, Jerome stood in the guest bathroom, staring at his reflection. He pulled on tactical gloves, feeling the familiar grip. His body had changed over the years, softer, heavier, but his eyes held the same focused intensity from his service days. "You tried to erase a soldier," he whispered to his reflection. Now, you've got a war. His phone glowed on the counter, displaying Marcus's message. Systems ready. Operation is go. Jerome studied himself one final time. The man in the mirror wasn't the same person who'd grilled ribs in his backyard days ago. That man had died in the flames with his house. What emerged was something older, harder. A warrior reborn from the ashes of his former life. The phone's glow cast shadows across his face, highlighting the resolve in his expression. Years of training, combat experience, and tactical knowledge surged through his mind. They had awakened something they couldn't control, unleashed a force they never expected to face. His reflection stared back at him. Dangerous, focused, ready for war. The basement hummed with electronic energy as screens cast a pale blue glow across Jerome's face. Cables snaked between laptops and monitors, creating a web of digital surveillance. Marcus sat hunched over the main keyboard, his fingers dancing across keys with practiced precision. "How's that firewall looking?" Jerome asked, leaning closer to study the scrolling code. Marcus grinned, not taking his eyes off the screen. "These county systems? Child's play compared to what we dealt with overseas. Remember that Serbian network?" "Focus, brother," Jerome said, but smiled at the memory. "We need everything they tried to bury." "Already got something." Marcus pointed to a stream of data. "They used basic deletion protocols. Amateur hour. The files are still in the system architecture, just hidden beneath surface directories." Jerome pulled up a chair, watching as Marcus deployed the military-grade decryption key, a souvenir from their service days. The program carved through the police department's security like a hot knife through butter. "There," Marcus whispered as folders began populating the screen. Body cam archives, internal affairs, payment records. Jerome's jaw tightened as he clicked through the first video file. The footage showed Danner's camera perspective from the barbecue. Clear, damning evidence of the assault. They didn't even properly delete it. Just buried it deep enough that no one would look. "Typical bureaucrat mindset," Marcus muttered, copying files to an external drive. "They think hiding something is the same as destroying it." They worked methodically through the night, uncovering layer after layer of corruption. Complaint records stretched back years. Dozens of families targeted, evidence suppressed, witnesses intimidated. Payment logs showed suspicious transfers to officers involved in misconduct cases. "Look at this," Jerome said, opening an audio file. Captain Ames's voice filled the basement, crisp and cold. "Keep that neighborhood quiet, Danner. I don't care how you do it. These people need to learn their place. If anyone gives you trouble, handle it. The department will back you up." Marcus whistled low. "That's your smoking gun right there." "There's more." Jerome played another clip. A phone call between Ames and the police union representative, discussing how to lose the body cam footage from the barbecue incident. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. Attorney Reese appeared carrying fresh coffee. His eyes widened at the wall of evidence displayed across the screens. "My God," he breathed, setting down the mugs. "This is bigger than we thought. Systematic targeting, coordinated cover-ups. All of it documented," Jerome said, gesturing to the drives. "Every deleted file, every crooked deal, every abuse of power." Reese ran a hand through his hair, expression grave. "If you leak this, they'll come after you harder. This isn't just about Danner anymore. This implicates the entire command structure." Jerome turned to face him, voice steady. "Then let them." Marcus began setting up anonymous accounts, routing them through overseas servers. "We'll schedule staged releases," he explained. "Different platforms, different times. Once it starts, they won't be able to contain it." 48 hours, Jerome decided, checking his watch. Give them 2 days of peace before their world burns down. They worked until dawn, meticulously organizing the evidence into damning packages. Witness statements, financial records, internal messages showing explicit racism and targeted harassment. The truth, laid bare in ones and zeros. Vanessa brought down breakfast as they finished the final uploads. She touched Jerome's shoulder, concern in her eyes. "Are you sure about this?" He covered her hand with his. "They tried to destroy our family, tried to bury the truth. Now everyone will see exactly who they are." The scheduling program blinked green. Uploads complete, timer set. In 48 hours, the carefully constructed facade of the police department would shatter. Every news outlet, every social media platform, every community forum would receive the evidence simultaneously. Jerome sat back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Years of military discipline steadied his nerves as he watched the countdown begin. Clocks ticking. Marcus began disconnecting equipment, wiping drives, removing their digital fingerprints. "Just like old times," he said softly, waiting for the mission to go hot. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, nature's percussion matching the tension in the basement. Rain began to patter against the small windows, a steady drumbeat counting down the hours. The storm would pass, but its effects would linger. Reese gathered the physical copies of evidence into his briefcase. "I'll have the legal documents ready. Once this breaks, we'll need to move fast." Jerome nodded, helping Marcus pack away the last of the gear. The basement slowly transformed back into a normal storage space, hiding all evidence of their night's work. But in cyberspace, the truth waited like a coiled spring, ready to unleash chaos. Upstairs, they could hear Tobias and Layla getting ready for school. Normal morning sounds, cereal bowls clinking, backpack zippers, quiet conversation. Jerome listened, remembering why they were fighting. Not for revenge, but for justice. Not just for his family, but for every family that had been silenced. The thunder growled again, closer now. Marcus checked his phone one last time, confirming the upload schedules were locked in. 47 hours, 56 minutes, he reported. Jerome stood in the basement doorway, watching the rain streak down the windows. The storm outside was building, drawing energy from the warm Georgia air. But the real tempest was digital, invisible, inevitable, waiting to break over the city with the force of long-buried truth. "Now we wait," he said quietly, as another rumble of thunder shook the house. The rain drummed against the windows of Reese's guest house, creating shifting shadows across the living room walls. Jerome sat in semi-darkness, cleaning his old combat knife while Vanessa helped the kids with homework at the kitchen table. Marcus monitored police frequencies on a laptop, headphones covering one ear. Jerome's phone buzzed. Unknown number. His thumb swiped across the screen, revealing 5 words that made his stomach tighten. "We know where you are." "Marcus," he called softly. "We've got incoming." Before Marcus could respond, bright headlights swept across the front windows, cutting through the rain like searchlights. Car doors slammed. Heavy footsteps splashed through puddles. "Vanessa, get the kids to the basement," Jerome commanded, voice calm but firm. "Now!" She didn't hesitate, gathering Tobias and Layla quickly. Years of military family life had taught her when questions could wait. Marcus killed the house lights, plunging them into darkness broken only by occasional lightning flashes. Through rain-streaked glass, Jerome counted 4 figures approaching. Danner's bulk unmistakable even in shadow, Holt's nervous energy evident in his movement. 2 other officers flanked them, hands already on their weapons. "Back door," Jerome whispered to Marcus. "Like Kandahar." Marcus nodded, understanding instantly. They'd run similar operations countless times, the hunter becoming the hunted. Jerome slipped out through the kitchen while Marcus took up position near the front windows, ready to direct attention. The rain soaked Jerome instantly as he moved through the backyard. His feet, once slowed by extra weight, now found their old rhythm. Each step was calculated, silent, despite the mud. Lightning flashed, and he pressed against a tree, counting the seconds until thunder masked his movement. Holt had separated from the group, cocky and careless, checking the side of the house. Jerome waited until the thunder rolled, then closed the distance. His hand shot out in a precise knife-hand strike to Holt's throat. The officer's gun clattered into a puddle as he dropped, gasping silently. Inside, he heard Danner's voice. "Police! Open up!" The front door splintered under a boot. Marcus's voice carried back, "This is private property. I'm armed and authorized to defend myself." Jerome used the distraction to move again. The two unknown officers had spread out, trying to flank the house. Amateur tactics. He caught the first one from behind, using the rain to mask his approach. A quick armbar takedown left the man face down in the mud, zip-tied with his own cuffs. Lightning illuminated the yard again. The second officer spotted Jerome and raised his weapon. Jerome was already moving, closing the distance before the man could aim properly. He grabbed the gun barrel, twisting it away as they grappled. The officer had youth and training, but Jerome had experience and desperation. The fight ended with another zip tie and a controlled chokehold. Inside, furniture crashed. Marcus was keeping Danner occupied, but Jerome knew his friend wouldn't engage directly. That was part of the plan. Keep them focused forward while death came from behind. Jerome retrieved Holt's dropped weapon, checking the magazine out of habit. Through a window, he saw Vanessa and the kids huddled in the basement, safe but terrified. Layla's eyes met his for a moment. He pressed a finger to his lips, then disappeared back into the rain. Danner's voice boomed from inside. "Where is he? Where's that fat bastard hiding?" Thunder crashed again. Jerome slipped through the back door, water running off him in streams. Marcus had Danner's attention focused toward the front room. The sergeant's back was exposed, a rookie mistake born of arrogance. Jerome moved like a shadow, muscle memory from countless missions taking over. His first strike took Danner's knee from behind. The second knocked the gun from his hand. The sergeant spun, surprisingly fast, throwing a wild punch that Jerome slipped easily. They crashed through the coffee table, glass shattering. Danner was strong, but his technique was sloppy. All anger and no discipline. Jerome absorbed a punch to redirect the energy, then countered with precision strikes to nerve clusters. Each hit strategic, measured, designed to disable without killing. The fight spilled back outside through the broken door. Rain and mud made every movement treacherous. Danner slipped, and Jerome pressed the advantage. A sweep took the sergeant's legs completely. He landed hard, splashing in the muck. Jerome retrieved the fallen gun, pressing it against Danner's temple. The sergeant froze, finally understanding the depth of his mistake. Lightning flashed across Jerome's face, highlighting eyes that had seen far worse men than this. "This is for my family," Jerome growled, finger tightening on the trigger. Distant sirens pierced the storm's rhythm, but these were different. Not the familiar whoop of local police, but the distinct wail of federal vehicles. Red and blue lights began reflecting off the raindrops, approaching fast. Jerome held the gun steady, watching fear replace arrogance in Danner's eyes. Every muscle screamed for closure, for vengeance, but he was more than his rage, more than what they tried to make him become. The FBI vehicles skidded to a stop in front of the house, agents pouring out with weapons drawn. Jerome slowly lowered the gun, stepping back from Danner's mud-covered form. Real justice had arrived. Not the corrupt facade Danner hid behind, but the true force of law. Rain continued to pour, washing mud from both men. In the distance, thunder rolled once more, nature's final punctuation to the night's violence. The first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the rain-soaked scene in pale gray light. FBI vehicles surrounded Reese's property, their emergency lights cutting through the lingering darkness in rhythmic pulses of red and blue. Agents in windbreakers marked FBI moved with practiced efficiency, securing the area and collecting evidence. Danner struggled against two agents as they pushed him toward a waiting vehicle, his once pristine uniform now caked with mud. "This is a setup," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "You can't do this to me. I'm a police sergeant." A few yards away, Holt sat on the wet ground, handcuffed and defeated. His earlier bravado had evaporated, replaced by the terrified expression of someone watching their world collapse. "It was Ames," he blurted out, trying to save himself. "Captain Ames gave the orders. She told us which families to target." Jerome stood on the front porch with Vanessa and the kids, watching the scene unfold. An FBI agent in a suit approached them, tablet in hand. "Mr. Hightower," she said, "I'm Special Agent Sarah Torres. Your data leak hit every major news outlet about 3 hours ago. The evidence is overwhelming." She turned the tablet toward them, showing news headlines scrolling across the screen. "Police Department corruption exposed. Captain orders targeted harassment of minority families. Systemic abuse uncovered in Georgia PD." The audio recordings were particularly damning, Torres continued. "We have Captain Ames on tape ordering officers to make examples of specific families, authorizing illegal surveillance, and coordinating cover-ups of misconduct. The paper trail of bribes and deleted evidence goes back years." Reese emerged from his house, still wearing yesterday's rumpled suit but grinning broadly. "The U.S. Attorney's Office just called," he announced. "All charges against you are being dropped, Jerome. They're formally apologizing for the wrongful arrest and offering immediate compensation." Vanessa wrapped her arms around Jerome's waist, pressing her face against his chest. "You did it," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "You really did it." Jerome shook his head gently. "No," he corrected her softly. "We did it. All of us. You stayed strong, the kids stayed brave, and our community stood together." Tobias and Layla hugged their parents, forming a tight family circle as more police vehicles arrived. These carried internal affairs investigators, come to collect computers and files from the precinct. Marcus emerged from the basement carrying his laptop. "You guys need to see this," he said, turning on the local news. The screen showed live helicopter footage of the police headquarters, where Captain Ames was being led out in handcuffs. The usually composed captain had lost all pretense of control. She thrashed against the agents holding her, her carefully maintained image shattered. "This is a witch hunt!" she screamed, as reporters thrust microphones toward her. "These are good officers! We maintain order!" "Some order," Reese scoffed. The FBI found over 200 complaints that were deliberately buried. Families harassed, evidence planted, witnesses intimidated. They're saying this could be one of the largest police corruption cases in state history. More agents approached with evidence bags containing the weapons taken from Danner and his team. "We'll need statements from all of you," Torres said. "The attempted assault tonight will be added to their charges. Witness intimidation, attempted breaking and entering, illegal use of police resources." The list went on as the sky continued to lighten. Neighbors had begun gathering at the edge of the property, held back by yellow crime scene tape. Many were families who had suffered similar harassment, now watching justice finally arrive. Mrs. Briggs, who had live-streamed the original BBQ incident, was already recording again. This time, her commentary was triumphant. "They thought they could break us. They thought they could silence us. But look who's in handcuffs now." The crowd cheered as another FBI van arrived. 2 agents emerged, escorting Officer Vargas, the young cop who had leaked the initial dash cam footage. He nodded respectfully toward Jerome before being led inside to give his statement. He came forward officially an hour ago, Torres explained. Turned over everything he knew about the department's illegal operations. He's being granted immunity in exchange for his testimony. Jerome watched as more officers were brought in for questioning. Some looked defiant, others broken, but all wore the same expression of men and women whose untouchable status had suddenly vanished. Holt was helped to his feet and led toward a different vehicle. He stopped briefly, looking back at Jerome with a mix of fear and something like reluctant respect. "I never knew," he muttered. "Never knew what you really were." "That was the point," Jerome replied calmly. "You saw what you wanted to see. You never looked deeper." The morning sun finally broke through the clouds as Danner was guided toward the last FBI van. He twisted around, catching Jerome's eyes one final time. The hatred was gone from his face, replaced by something Jerome had seen before in others who had underestimated him. Pure, primal fear. The recognition that they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could handle. The van doors slammed shut, and Danner disappeared inside. Jerome felt Vanessa squeeze his hand as the vehicle pulled away, carrying with it the last pieces of their ordeal. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees surrounding the courthouse, carrying with it the murmur of hundreds of voices. The marble steps were a sea of people. Reporters with cameras and microphones, community members holding signs, and families who had come forward with their own stories of police harassment. Jerome adjusted his navy blue tie, the fabric crisp against his freshly pressed white shirt. The suit fit differently now. Months of stress and renewed training had stripped away some of his previous bulk, revealing more of the warrior's frame beneath. Beside him, Vanessa wore a simple yellow dress that caught the morning light, her head held high. Reese stood on his other side, briefcase in hand, looking both exhausted and triumphant. The jury had deliberated for less than 6 hours. Now, as the verdict echoed through speakers set up outside the courthouse, the crowd fell silent. In the matter of Hightower versus the City of Georgia Police Department, the court clerk's voice rang out, "The jury finds in favor of the plaintiff. Damages are awarded in the amount of $12 million. The explosion of cheers drowned out the rest of the announcement. Signs waved, people hugged, and somewhere in the crowd, Mrs. Briggs's voice could be heard shouting, "That's what I'm talking about!" But there was more. The criminal verdicts followed. Former Captain Brenda Ames, guilty on multiple counts of conspiracy, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations. 8 years in federal prison. Sergeant Rick Danner, guilty of assault, harassment, and civil rights violations. 6 years. Officer Mason Holt, 4 years, with possibility of parole. Reese stepped forward first, raising his hands for quiet. "Today," he declared, "we've seen that justice is possible when we stand together and demand it. The Hightower family's courage has exposed corruption that festered for years. Their victory is everyone's victory." Reporters thrust microphones forward, questions overlapping. "Mr. Hightower, how does it feel? Will you rebuild your home? What message do you have for other departments?" Jerome moved to the podium, his presence commanding immediate attention. The crowd hushed, phones raised to record his words. Vanessa squeezed his hand once before he began. "For years," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the courthouse steps, "I chose silence. After leaving the Navy, I wanted peace. I wanted to be just another neighbor, father, mechanic. Some mistook that silence for weakness." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But silence was my teacher. It taught me to watch, to listen, to understand the right moment to act." Camera flashes punctuated his words as he continued. They came to my home, thinking they'd found an easy target. They saw what they wanted to see, a big man who'd gotten soft. But they never asked why I could afford that home. Never wondered what I did before opening my shop. Never thought about why I stayed so calm under pressure. A ripple of appreciation moved through the crowd. Several veterans in attendance nodded knowingly. "This isn't just about me," Jerome continued. "It's about every family who's faced harassment. Every person who's been told to stay quiet and accept injustice. Every community that's lived in fear of those sworn to protect them." His voice grew stronger. "That ends today. We've shown that no badge puts you above the law. No uniform gives you the right to terrorize families, and no amount of power can silence the truth forever." Social media exploded as his words went viral. Hashtags trended. Hightower strong, silence is strength, talk justice served. Messages of support poured in from across the country. After the speeches, Jerome and his family made their way through the crowd. People reached out to shake his hand, share their stories, thank him for standing up. One elderly woman grabbed his arm, tears in her eyes. "My grandson," she said. "They did the same to him last year. But now they'll think twice." Reese handled the final press questions while the Hightowers slipped away. They drove across town, past their old neighborhood, until they reached the empty lot where their home had once stood. The charred ruins had been cleared away, leaving bare earth ready for new beginnings. Construction equipment stood ready. Bulldozers, cement mixers, stacks of lumber. The contractor's sign displayed a rendering of their new home, larger and stronger than before. The insurance money and part of the settlement would build something lasting. Jerome stepped onto the dirt, Vanessa and the kids following. Tobias picked up a handful of soil, letting it sift through his fingers. "It feels different now," he said thoughtfully. "Because we're different," Layla replied, showing wisdom beyond her years. "We're stronger." Vanessa wrapped her arms around her family, looking at the empty space that would soon be filled again. "We never broke," she said softly. "They threw everything at us, and we never broke." Workers were already gathering, preparing to break ground. The foreman approached with blueprints, explaining their plans to reinforce everything: stronger foundations, better security, a proper fence. But Jerome barely heard him. He was looking at the sky, remembering that first sunny afternoon that had changed everything. The smoke that had driven them out. The rain during the final confrontation. Now the sky was clear, the air fresh with possibility. His phone buzzed constantly with messages of support, news alerts about police reform bills being introduced, interview requests from national networks. But those could wait. Right now, this moment belonged to his family, standing on their land, unafraid, unbowed, ready to rebuild. 3 months had passed like a healing wound, leaving behind something stronger than before. The October air carried the sweet scent of smoking hickory as Jerome stood at his new grill, spatula in hand, watching flames dance beneath marinating ribs. The rebuilt Hightower home rose behind him, a testament to resilience, its fresh paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. The backyard was transformed but familiar. New grass had grown thick and green, erasing all traces of that July afternoon. A taller privacy fence now encircled the property, not to hide, but to define their space on their terms. String lights crisscrossed overhead, waiting for dusk to transform them into stars. Neighbors and supporters filled the yard, their chatter and laughter creating a warm symphony that Jerome had missed. Mrs. Briggs held court near the dessert table, regaling newcomers with her now famous live stream story. 12 million views, she declared proudly, waving a piece of peach cobbler. And every single one of them saw justice happen. Tobias hovered near the grill, studying his father's movements with exaggerated concentration. "Come on, Dad," he pleaded, reaching for the tongs. "I've been watching YouTube videos about grilling techniques. I'm ready." Jerome chuckled, shaking his head. "YouTube, huh? Is that supposed to impress me more than these 20 years of experience?" "20 years of burning perfectly good meat, you mean," Vanessa teased, appearing with a fresh platter. Her eyes sparkled with mischief and joy as she surveyed their filled yard. Children played tag between clusters of talking adults. Paper plates loaded with potato salad and cornbread balanced on knees. The scene was so normal, so right, it made her throat tight with emotion. "I heard that," Jerome protested, but his smile was warm as sunshine. He pulled her close for a quick kiss, ignoring Tobias's theatrical groan. At the edge of the property, a small contingent of reporters maintained a respectful distance. Their cameras captured B-roll for various features. The SEAL who fought back was trending again after the department's official overhaul. New leadership, new policies, new training programs. Change, slow but steady, rippling outward from this very yard. Layla threaded through the crowd with a pitcher of lemonade, pouring refills and collecting hugs. She'd grown inches taller since July, but something else had grown too. A quiet confidence, a certainty about justice and standing up for what's right. She'd started a student advocacy group at school, turning pain into purpose. "Hey, everyone!" Reese's voice carried across the yard. He stood on the new deck, raising a glass. The crowd quieted, turning toward him. "I think our host should say a few words." Jerome wiped his hands, looking around at the gathered faces. Some he'd known for years, others he'd met through the struggle. All of them were family now, bound by something stronger than blood. "You know," he began, his deep voice carrying easily, "I used to think peace meant staying quiet, keeping your head down, not making waves." He paused, letting his gaze sweep the yard. "But real peace? It comes from standing up, from telling the truth, even when truth is dangerous, from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone take that away." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Several phones recorded, but this wasn't for social media or news clips. This was for them, for here, for now. To truth, Jerome raised his glass. To family. And to never being silent again. To never being silent, the crowd echoed, glasses lifting skyward. The afternoon mellowed into evening. String lights winked to life overhead, casting warm pools of light across happy faces. Someone started playing music, soft jazz that wrapped around conversations like smoke from the grill. Kids chased fireflies, while adults settled into lawn chairs, sharing stories and plans for the future. Marcus, Jerome's former SEAL teammate, manned the grill now, giving Jerome a break. They'd stayed close after everything, rebuilding more than just a house. The cybersecurity company they'd started was already consulting for police departments nationwide, teaching accountability from the inside out. Vanessa found Jerome sitting quietly by the fire pit, watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of gold and purple. She settled beside him, their shoulders touching. Neither spoke for a long moment, just breathing in the peace they'd fought so hard to reclaim. Children's laughter floated across the yard. Tobias was showing Layla how to roast the perfect marshmallow, their faces glowing in the firelight. The sight made Jerome's chest tight with love and pride. "They're stronger now," Vanessa said softly, following his gaze. "We all are." Jerome nodded, watching smoke curl up from the grill into the golden sky. The same smoke that had once meant destruction now meant celebration. The same yard that had seen violence now overflowed with joy. The same man they'd tried to humiliate now sat tall, surrounded by love and respect. They came to break a man, he murmured, his voice low and sure, but all they did was remind him who he still is. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.